everybody. Welcome to the year in ABA, the year that was, with your very special friends from ABA Inside Track and Behavioral Observations. We're doing it again. It's a 2020 year-end wrap-up. So I will be, I don't know if I'll be leading the conversation, but I'll be the first one talking. I'm Robert Perry Cruz from ABA Inside Track. Who else is here?
As always, I'll be the first one talking, but it's also me, Diana.
And me, Jackie, who's always the third one talking.
Right. And it's me, Matt Cicoria from the Behavioral Observations podcast. Guys, thank you for inviting me to do this again. This is a fun little tradition that I've really come to enjoy. So I'm looking forward to a fun conversation as always.
Yeah.
Us too.
Nice. You're so nice. Like, I'm like, grr, grr. Diana's like, grr, Rob's talking. And Matt's like, oh, thanks, guys.
I don't think we've ever had a guest come on the show, Jackie, and be like, oh, God, I'm here now.
Oh, God. Damn it, I'm on. These people asked me to come on their podcast.
I guess. Whatever. No, this is...
Pat's game is over, so... You know.
Oh, well. I don't know. We haven't been following sports too much. I don't know. How about you, Matt? Have you been following sports this year?
You know, my pea brain only has room for the NFL. Like I don't follow baseball or hockey or basketball and things like that. And that's a good thing for me because otherwise I would get absolutely nothing done. So now I get less done in the fall. But if I was a year-round sports fanatic, it would be very challenging for me to function as an individual. So yeah, so I've been, but I mean, I think as I've gotten older, I've treated sports less importantly, if you will. Mm-hmm. So my kids are into it now, and so we'll all get together and watch, some football games on Sundays, and so that's been fun. But I'm not like, when I was in my 20s, we used to go to like the sports bar and watch all the games, But I don't have time for that anymore, and no one can go to sports bars right now.
Sports bars? What are those?
I know.
Wow. I was listening to a podcast today, and it was a live recording. It was the Flop House, and they talk about bad movies, and I've listened to that for a long time. And they're releasing their like episodes from last year when they did live shows, and one of them we'd been to, and the one they released today was like their second show that night, and we'd all gone. So Dan and I had gone. We gone with my brother and his wife. And I wanted to stay for that show. And I said, come on, guys, let's stay. They got tickets. We can go to the second show. And everyone's like, oh, who wants to go to the show? We don't need to go to the show. And, fast forward about a year. And man, doesn't everyone wish, don't you wish you'd just gone to one more live event when you had the chance?
For
but
sure.
No, we're all much too busy. You never know when there'll be a pandemic. So, when you got a chance for a live event, everybody, stay for two.
We could probably trade anecdotes here for a while. I'll make one last one real quick. But my wife and I had tickets to see a band. It was like March. It was like Friday, March 13th or 14th, or might have been the Friday afterwards. And it was like
the 12th. It was probably March 12th.
Okay.
It was Friday the 13th.
Oh, okay.
And it got canceled at the last minute, and we just. It's just one of those things. It's like, so no live music since then, sadly. So
no. Well, if this tenor, usually I think when we do these end of year in ABA, we're all kind of upbeat, like what a fun year in ABA it's been, and behavior analysis, and we had so much fun. And this one's starting off with a little bit of a downer, in case you were expecting us to sound really excited, because 2020 has been kind of Dinah wanted me to play a little something to celebrate what kind of a year it has been. Here we go. Ready?
I'm ready.
Okay. Y'all hear? You hear that?
I do, but that doesn't mean they can.
I hear it.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
I'll turn it up a little bit. Diana, why are we playing? Usually we play this crackling sound effect.
We're playing it because it's the beautiful sound of the roaring fire in the background here at the holidays. Isn't that why?
It's usually why we play it, but I think you said we need to play that crackling fire sound effect, not for the warm holiday crackling fire, but why, Diana?
Because I'm ready to bid adieu to the dumpster fire that was 2020.
There we go.
And I'm excited to discuss it and then bury it and move on with my life.
Okay. That's there we go. So that was our fire. Our fire sound. We got some audio cues. And I was like,
yeah, that was very slick, guys.
We're gonna burn that little
smooth
paper. We are gonna burn 2020 and then hold it over a lake and be like, goodbye, 2020. Goodbye.
We're just in like Viking funeral, we're going to like get a boat and, put some wood on it and then set it on fire and push it out into the Quabbin Reservoir.
On a bed of sage.
Yes.
Sorry, that's a little local mass humor for you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
hey, we decided because this is 2020 and all to have a beverage while we're doing this. So
yes.
Let's go around real quick and say what are we having tonight? So let's start with the Perry Cruises. What do you guys?
Oh yes. Well, Rob just finished his, but we are drinking a lovely red called Tiny Umbrellas.
It's a red blend.
And it's in fact a red blend.
Right?
Only the
is
finest.
it a table wine?
It probably would meet the criteria.
I don't know what that means, by the way.
It means it's
I think it's literally
wine.
it's just like, this is a cheap wine that we can put at the table or we can sell to you. I think that's really all it is.
It costs like $6.
It'll tell you the grapes if you look on the bag. What grapes?
It's made of grapes.
No, but the types of grapes.
No, it doesn't even tell you that.
It's like all the grapes.
It's a blend. Why would it tell you, right?
Here's the thing. I can't tell what's good wine and not good wine. So
that's the trick.
The price is right for me.
No, you want to read a good wine book. I don't know if I told you this, Jackie. I know I've never told you this, Matt, but you want a good wine book. It's called Fear of Wine. And the basic thesis is, don't worry, here's learning about wine, but you should just enjoy drinking wine and like enjoy it and learn more and be as comfortable with it as you want to be. You don't have to feel over confused, because that's no fun, which I appreciate that as a book.
Yeah.
I did. We are drinking it out of our Neshoba Valley Winery glasses. So that's a little bit classy.
The Herbert Linger Fruit Winery.
Yes.
All right, Jackie.
I'm drinking a beer from a local brewery called La Choux out of Marlborough, Massachusetts. And I am drinking their Galoshes of Fortune. What is it? Line. In mine, it's a smoothie style Berliner Weiss. And so this beer contains strawberries, peaches, vanilla, graham cracker, and milk sugar.
Wow.
That's too much.
It's their Saison and sour lime.
Wow.
That sounds fancy.
A cornucopia of flavors.
Thank you. Wow. It's delicious. The first drink, I was like, ugh. And then I was like, I'm going to drink it all. And then I drank it all. And if you don't know, I'm like not a drinker. I'm like a sipper. I'm not like a drinker. And the last time I had this, I drank it all in like 15 minutes. And my husband was like, and I was like, where's my next one? And he's like, oh no, here we go.
That's probably like 8% alcohol by volume, I'm guessing, with the big cans.
It is a big can.
It's a nice looking can.
And they put all that stuff in it.
Alcohol. Not that
That's
bad.
it. Oh, wow. Too much graham cracker. It sucked up all the alcohol.
The Galoshes line makes me think of, you guys remember that commercial where the guy drinks the champagne out of the shoe? And he says, the champagne's not Corbel. Do you guys remember that?
I do.
Yeah, like
remember
really 90s.
that. I do remember that.
But except yours is in a galosh.
And then Matt, what do you have? You have have a fancy beer, I think. I thought
I'd bring something, New Hampshire to the ABA Inside Track podcast. I do have actually have some a stash of Treehouse from Massachusetts, but I thought I'd go with something New Hampshire. I'm drinking a Litherman's. This is from Concord, New Hampshire, Hidden Driveways single IPA.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah. So cheers, guys. Thanks.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Clinkies.
Clink.
Clink, clink,
We
clink.
can clink, Rob.
No, we can clink.
Briefly, I'm going to be looking in your eyes.
To 2020.
That's good
Cheers
sound.
to 2020. Being over. Almost over.
All right.
When this comes out. All right. So now we'll talk about behavior analysis. So usually when we do these episodes, we have kind of a list of some topics, like the hot topics that we wanted to go over. So it's a short list this year because I think there's really one topic that we'll be discussing most of the time, and that is COVID-19 and the rise of telehealth and how that has impacted ABA services, how that has impacted ABA programs, how that's impacted every component of the field. So I guess we got kind of a list here. Why don't we'll just start? I guess we'll start where it starts. So every conference got canceled in 2020 and changed into an online conference. Did everyone here go to an online conference in 2020?
Yep.
I did.
Yes, I did.
What are we thinking about the online conferences? I know the first one I went to, I was so tired of being online at that point because it was sort of those early days in like April or June. I was just so done with it. But then it kind of came back around. I think I did the Bacb online on demand, and the fact that you could like change the speed of the videos, because I listen to a lot of podcasts at like double speed already. So the fact that I could do that with my conference, I was like, oh wow, I can just like get so much content so fast. And you don't, I mean, that's me. I don't think that works for everyone.
Let me just say that yeah, he got CEUs for it, but you haven't experienced
but would you get
quarantine.
half though if you listen to it 2x?
No, I get the same amount because I'm processing all that
I feel like they're like
information.
realizing their mistake now if they're listening to this.
I mean, the option was there. So it didn't say you can't listen to it fast. I got the code words.
So for listeners, the email address is ace@bacb. No, I'm just kidding.
That's going to be a real, I think that's going to be a real question because as I was doing it, I was like, maybe I'm not supposed to. I feel like I'm not supposed to do this, but at the same time, it's an option.
It felt so wrong, but it was.
And I have a character witness who will say, no, he listens to everything at double speed. Like this is how he consumes
Right. That's what
media.
I was about to say is you haven't experienced 2020 quarantine properly unless you've been trapped in a house with someone that listens to podcasts at full volume at double speed most of the time out loud, not even through headphones.
Wow.
I can't stand it anymore. Actually, he does wear headphones now.
That's
because it was a breaking point for me. Yeah. So he does. He's like, this is the speed at which I think, which I do believe.
But I love it. I loved because you go to a conference. It's like I don't have time. I'm like I'm not going to be able to watch more than 3 or 4 of these before I just can't sit in front of my computer anymore. Maybe the times, and I watched everything I wanted to, and it was great. I felt like it was such a cool way to consume. Kind of media, which to some extent the online conference really was. Like that's sort of what I treated it as. Very different than going to a conference in person where you go to the talks you want to, you do some, meeting people. So I don't know, but that was my experience with the online conferences. It was nice to sort of have that. It felt a little less special in that regard, but it also felt like I could get great content from great speakers the way I wanted it to. Well,
the cool thing is that people have more choice in terms of where they can get their continuing ed. And so, if, someone in, California wants to participate in the New Hampshire ABA, they can do so, and vice versa. So I think that opening up the choice is certainly really helpful. It would be interesting from a kind of administration standpoint. I think the pricing model probably has to reflect that as well. And so that's a whole nother podcast, another rabbit hole we can go down to. But one of the things I had nothing to do other than try to promote it. But the folks here in New Hampshire at New Hampshire ABA, they did like a kind of pay what you want to type of model that reflected the nature of that. Hey, we're not flying these people in. We're not putting them up in a hotel for 2 or 3 days and feeding them and carting them around and whatnot. So our overhead is, as such, much lower, and so we're going to reflect that in the price. And so I thought that was definitely cool, and hopefully other people follow that model. Did you guys do any live interviews or anything like that? I had a chance to do a couple, and it was really interesting to try to do that online without just talking into. I mean, I guess being a podcaster, you kind of are used to not getting any audience feedback. But when you know that there are people out there listening to you and you can't see them, you can't hear them or anything like that, it definitely is a little bit challenging.
You're just talking to a black screen. Mm-hmm. So it felt mostly just like doing a podcast, I think, for us. So we did we did presentation at the Thompson Center conference that way. The Greater Boston ABA conference that way. And then for Bacb, we did like a social hour kind of thing, which was cool. We did get to have some audience interaction for that one. I attended Bacb, and that was really fun. And then Jackie was at the Western Connecticut, is that right?
Yep.
State University put on a free conference. I think they may have had grant money that was specifically on teaching.
Online pedagogy.
And that one was fantastic. And I didn't feel like I lost any aspect of the content. And I think the concern's always, are you going to lose the social component, right? And in some ways, it's just never going to be the same because you can't go out afterwards and hang out with friends and see people you haven't seen in a long time and go to dinner. But I will say that in both of those conferences, the chat function was very active, very lively, and there were some great like side conversations that really added to the presenters during that time. So I really liked that part. I felt like I got more out of the talks by being able to like view the chat and talk to other people about the discussion at the same time. So that was cool.
Awesome.
Yeah, I mean, I see that chat as being. I think so many of these conferences were getting their handle on like, well, how are we going to do that this year? And I think some did basically. Here's what the conference would have been like if you were here, but you're at your computer. And then others, I think, especially some of the later ones who were doing it, sort of, who did maybe like a fall or like an early winter conference, had sort of seen the pros and cons of that, and we're trying to like, well, what else can we do? Like, how can we make this more fun? How can we make this more interactive? How can we add something to the overall experience? And I'll be interested to see when in 2021, I mean late 2021 probably, but is this just going to be an option going forward? Like, what, let's always have this. Let's just always make this an available thing, whether or not there's an in-person conference. But like you said, Matt, hey, you can go to any conference in the country, any conference in the world, really. You just pay and you can watch the talks, and maybe they do the on-demand after the fact, which I really love that. Maybe they do you have to be there, but they just change the format. And will it be that different? Will it become like one of those things that no one pays for? Because it's like, I want to go to a conference. I don't want to just watch a conference on TV. That's boring. I don't like that. I guess time will tell whether this continues to be a trend or whether it's a flash in the pan. We had to do it that way this year.
Yeah, I have to imagine that when in-person conferences resume, there'll be some number of people who are, certainly relieved to go and kind of mingle and socialize and things like that. But I think for the large majority of practitioners who are, just busy doing the day-to-day stuff and working and taking care of their family and everything else in between, taking a day off to drive a couple of hours to, or even like fly to ABAI or APBA or something like that, that might be something that there might be a smaller market for that. Remains to be seen for sure. I know or at least from what I understand, for trying to transmit a live conference, an in-person conference online, at least from what I understand, is a much higher bar to hurdle than just doing a pure online conference, because you have to have someone there filming, and then you have to make sure the audio is set up, and it's going to get funneled out to the internet, and so on and so forth. And so there's a lot more moving pieces to that.
Yeah.
So I know some folks who've been involved with those sorts of endeavors, and it's kind of a pain in the butt. And then there's always that, like, it's kind of like walking a tight, it's like a high wire act, it's like anything can go wrong at any time. And you've got upset people at home, or in their office or whatever, who aren't, able to see what's going on or having their learning experience disrupted. But the ability to record it and, view it later certainly is huge.
Yeah.
Yeah. We had several meetings just to set up that little social hour for Babbitt, and it was like a lot of moving parts and a lot of people involved. I was like, oh man, I'm so glad I don't run a conference.
And I don't know about you guys. I felt so like old and like, well, is it gonna be like we're standing there? Like I just felt like I could not wrap my head around like the virtual, like all the things you can do. It's sort of like imagining, when traditional 2D animation went to 3D, it's like, what? The 3 dimensions? How would I do this thing? I just felt like I can't wrap my head around this as anything other than like what we would typically do in person. I just can't figure it out. And, it made a lot of sense at the end, but I'm hoping there are other people who feel that way too. And it wasn't just like my Methuselah, how does streaming work these days?
Well, we all learned a lot this year.
I guess everyone learned a lot.
Which brings you into your next point.
Our next point. Yeah. So we've all learned a lot. One thing I think we've all learned a ton about in the past year is the use of telehealth. I don't know, Matt, had you done episodes on telehealth, or had you talked a lot about telehealth on your show prior to 2020? Yeah,
I did a show with Wendy Mihalacek from the University of Oregon in 2017, way back when. I re-listened to the episode, and what I ended up doing is I ended up re-releasing it in March or April or something, or May. I was like, this is pretty much still valid, and because I reached out to her on Twitter. I said, hey, you want to come do that again? And I think she was just underwater trying to keep up with all our other responsibilities and stuff. Certainly there are other people I could have reached out to, but it was one of those things where it's like, I have this footage already. I went back and looked at the original downloads, and then figured, I can, the audience is larger now in 2020 than it was in 2017. And it's very likely that, some folks didn't catch that one. So I just ended up re-releasing that. There's been, telehealth talked about as an aside here and there. I think one of my early episodes with Megan Miller, we talked a little bit about telehealth as she was supporting some families overseas in Europe and Africa and the Middle East and things like that. And there's probably one or two other people I'm forgetting where we talked about it in the context of other things. But the show with Wendy was the only show that I think I did on telehealth exclusively.
We'd had one on ethics and telehealth, and it was funny because so much of that episode was on, here's all the technological things you'd need, and here are all the laws that apply to using telehealth, and here are some of the pros and cons. And then, I think we did the same. We didn't. I don't think we released it in the feed, but we were like, here, it's like, front and center on the page at one point. And I'm thinking, half of these ethical rules and half of these laws don't apply right now. And it was barely like a year and a half, I think, since we talked about them.
Well, because they waived some of them.
They waived some of them
just for this time period.
It was so funny that so much of the time we'd spent talking about telehealth was on, we talked a little bit, but so much on like the technological aspect and the legal aspect and the ethical aspect of that legality, and how so many of that, how that had just changed pretty drastically in a very short amount of time, just because all of a sudden this thing that, various people around the country or world had been doing, it's like, hey, everyone gets to do this now. I hope you're ready for telehealth. It was quite the shock. I enjoyed it. I think, there were a lot of effort in the field to get as many articles out about telehealth as possible. Certainly, I think the common theme was everybody sort of just accepting the fact that, like, we don't all know how to do this perfectly. We're going to try our very, very best, and we're going to live up to what we, our principles and our ethics, and just try to maintain a semblance of meaningful services for the families that are expecting these services. And, it's hard. I know, Matt, you consult a lot in the schools, so you're kind of the same boat as me. Is the schools were in the same boat of just doing stuff and hoping for the best, and only recently have kind of gotten their feet under them in terms of what that's going to look like. But, it was the same for practitioners out there. Just, should we do services? Can we do services? And that was one of the debates in some of the articles, right? Can you do services with telehealth? What do you need to do telehealth? You can't just suddenly do it. Just turn the telehealth switch.
Well, even upstream of that is, of the decision to whether or not to do telehealth is whether or not to do in-person services. And I know that was something, there was some considerable discussion about that. And I think going back to, again, I'm thinking March, I could have the dates wrong. And I honestly didn't have a chance to run down the specific references for these articles. I can just mention them in generalities, and I'll find the actual citations and put them in the show notes. But it was I think Matt Broadhead, David Cox, and there might have been another co-author that whose name escapes me right now, and I apologize. And they made a case in behavior analysis. I think it was in behavior analysis and practice about, like, hey, let's because we serve this vulnerable population, we don't know much about COVID-19. This, again, we're going back in time several months now. They're making the case for, kind of like to be on the conservative side as to whether or not to continue to provide in-person services. And then there was what I believe to be a rejoinder to that by Linda LeBlanc and some co-authors as well. It was kind of interesting because I know Matt, pretty well, and I talked to him about that. And my feeling is that article that he and David and their co-authors wrote was relevant for that specific moment in time where, like, we didn't know anything about this stuff. And it's like, well, how long does it last does it last longer on a plastic surface or a wood surface? Or there's all these kind of questions flying around. And and I think the response to that was, I don't remember the interval of time that passed, but it was, some bit of time past that. And I think, my takeaway from both of those articles, like they're both right in the times in which those articles came out.
Right.
Like I think there was an appeal for caution, that was probably prudent in the very early days of the pandemic, and then once we got to understand what was and wasn't safe, then I think a lot of practitioners and a lot of agencies and clinics and things like that took the necessary precautions to continue to provide services, and have been doing so, from what I understand, relatively successfully. And I want to give a shout out to, I'll think of it in a second. But there was some discussions on my Facebook page, on the Behavioral Observations Facebook page, about that. And there was it was a really kind of fun, kind of vigorous debate back and forth, because you can make a great argument either way, because gosh, who wants to put individuals at risk, right? And at the same time, we know these kids need these services, otherwise, they're not going to meet the goals that we want them to meet, and so on, and
or severely regress, right? So a lot of students that I knew about, when I was talking to parents, and they were like, it's been a few months and now my child can't do any of the things they could do before, because they don't have the necessary supports in place to keep learning.
Yeah. And it was Jeff Tiger. So I'm sorry, Jeff, if you're listening, I'm sorry, I forgot that. But he had some really good input on the pro side of providing services, even in the early days of. I
remember that. I was following that, Matt, because Diana and I were making the hardy decision whether to reopen our clinic at that time. And I remember being like, oh, right, I got to go to Facebook and see what the argument is.
Jackie,
No, but to see what the arguments are before and up, because I had both papers with me. And, my boss was like, what is your field doing? And I'm like, well, both. Right? And so, I wanted, that discussion.
Better do some Facebook research.
I know that sounds horrible, but it wasn't research, right? But it was like listening to...
No, but it's like day to day, everything is changing.
Yes. Yep.
And the recommendations are changing. And that's really where, some form of social media is where you're going to get the most current information. But I think we do need to give a shout out to behavior analysis in practice.
Yes.
And the speed at which, just the idea, like, let's get information in and then back out as fast as we can, right? And it doesn't have to be perfect, but it's for fast release. And I think that given the normal, 2-year time period that sometimes it takes to produce articles, that was not going to cut it in this time period. So I really do think that was a smart move on their part, and they were able to get that information out in a way that wasn't just on social media for people to consume and make hopefully some more educated decisions.
But for them too, I'm going to give them a double shout out too, because they not only did it with COVID, but they also did it with the social justice, social change papers, right? So when there was a need, they stepped up, right? Had a guest editor, they went for it.
Yeah. I think one of the things that is, I guess I'm going to call it a pro about these times, about the times in general, not about COVID, but about the time in general, was I know doing our show, and Matt, you probably get this during your show, like week after week after week, is you get a sense of like the general narrative of behavior analysis, like research, like what are people doing? Like what are the trends? What are people interested in? And I think that must be hard for practitioners who are just like, I go to work, I got to do my job, I research things when I need to, I try to, I go to my conferences, but I can only do so much. This is probably the first time that almost everyone in the field, if they wanted to find it, could like watch the development almost out of whole cloth of an entire branch of research that just didn't really exist or existed in various formats. You could just watch it like in those BAP articles, in some of the other articles, in kind of conference talks. Like you could just see it develop over a short amount of time. Like I know we had Dr. Francesca Delia Espinosa on talking about like her work in Italy, and it was just so fascinating to hear about like how do you go from something that's never happened to remaking your entire ability to provide services. It's just like almost in real time, just like hearing that discussion. So I think it is going to be one of those things that hopefully we'll never live through something like this again. And it'll be that kind of microcosm moment of what is it like to be in this moment? Like how does science develop? How does science continue to answer questions, like meaningful questions? And then how do this is the average practitioner in a field respond to that and use that information and then develop their own information? So, I mean, in that way, it was very fascinating, though. As much as you don't want to look at the train wreck that was this year, that would be something I like.
I think the neat thing about our field is that a lot of these practices were in place and were being done in some quarters. You had leaders like Wendy Mihalicek and David Wacker, and other people doing a lot of this work already. And its popularity perhaps wasn't as big as like the ISCA or something like that, but there was work being done, so it was an opportunity to kind of showcase some things that are already happening, and so I think that that I think shows the versatility of the types of things that we can do in this field. One of the things that I tried to do also with regard to the pandemic is, Rob, I think we're perhaps hinting in this direction. You do get a sense of what some of the touchstones are in the field and whatnot, and early on in the pandemic, so one of the when people are like hoarding toilet paper and things like that, I had Derek Reed on and talked about the behavioral economics of toilet paper hoarding and all sorts of other things like that, and then with and so I don't see myself as a journalist per se, but I think this is the closest I've felt to doing some sort of long form journalism in that regard. And so like when I had Amy Evans on to talk about parents helping their kids learn at home because they're essentially curriculum deprived at the moment, and things like that. And so I don't know. It was interesting. Before that, I was like, I want to just talk about the stuff I'm interested in. And to a large degree, that's still the truth, And then, but it just so happened that the Venn diagram had some considerable overlap at that point, and I felt it was important to try to bring some guests on who could shed some light on those aspects of the pandemic that were, that hopefully practitioners were able to take some good information away from.
So let's talk a little bit about we talked about kind of home services, but we've also got, in terms of our areas of specialty, it's mostly going to be in, work with schools and work at the university. So I don't know. Why don't we'll start with schools just because that's the next one on the list. I think this is still, talking about challenges and barriers. I mean, I don't know if you're still seeing this, Matt, but it just feels like so many of the reinforcers, the aversives that maintain appropriate school behavior are just out the window this past year. The controlled learning environment is gone. And, for some kids, like our oldest son, he's like, I love this. I never want to go back to school. He never wants to go back. And it's hard to explain to him, not everyone likes to learn. Not everybody, has a place where they can go. Not everybody has parents who have someone available to help them when they get stuck. Not everyone has, good Wi-Fi. Not everyone can just sort of get all their work done in 3 hours and then be like, great, I got the data myself now. I'll like hang out in my room. It's, I know I see that. I mean, have you seen that with a lot of the folks you've worked with and schools you work with?
Yeah, there's no way to sugarcoat this, guys. For me, it's heartbreaking. And it's one of those things where if you have some advantages in life, your children will be less affected by this.
Absolutely.
And if not, your children's educational progress will likely suffer considerably. And, for the most part, a lot of the school districts I support in New Hampshire are very impoverished. And, these kids have been out of school. They missed like 6 months of school. And they're in a home situation that is less than ideal. And, whereas I think in a online learning environment where, at least I just can speak from my experience, like, and my kids are older too. They know how to read, they know how to write, they know how to do math. So they're middle and high schoolers right now. So if I had a kid who was like learning math facts and phonics and things like that, I would be really frightened. I would be I would be trying to do, all the. I would be brushing up on my precision teaching and doing timings and things like that, and and the whole 9 yards. And that's because I know how to do that. Or I know enough to be dangerous, but I know how to do that, right? And other families probably don't. At least the families that I support in these communities that are largely disadvantaged, and so I don't know. It's something that really it's one of those things too. It's for me. It's most of my work is with intervening with problem behaviors in schools, and so just from my own practice, it basically has been shuttered, from March through September, and then it's only kind of slightly operating with some of the districts that are providing in-school services. And those kids that are coming back, and the ability for teachers to get any sort of classroom management going is even more compromised because the kids have had even more time off, if you will, outside of a structured environment, and things along those lines. So, I don't know. I'm probably sounding like a wicked downer here, but it's just something. I'm glad to see there are areas of behavior analysis that are figuring out how to thrive or at least move forward in this environment. I think the school thing is something that at least from my perspective, we don't have quite figured out yet, or at least the structures, the institutional structures in public ed are, they're trying, and they are trying. My wife's a teacher. My wife's a public school teacher, and but they just, they don't have the right tools. That a lot of these, and it's just, again, it's one of those things. It's if you have means and you have advantages, your kids will likely do better. And again, my heart just breaks for those who aren't as fortunate as other folks are.
Right. Yeah. Well, the week that we're recording this, there's data that came out that said, kids aren't really falling behind, right? They look like they're okay as far as like their standardized test scores, with the caveat that there's a huge swath of kids that they don't have data for anymore because they've just fallen off the radar. They're not attending online school.
Wait,
they haven't been
only the kids who go to school and like show up every time, even though no one's forcing them to go take the test, the scores look really good. Wow, that's
correct.
I can't see a confound anywhere there. That's amazing.
Yeah, and another aspect of this that's also troubling is that for a lot of these kids, like, school's the best thing going for them.
Yeah.
And they're not able.
Yeah, that's really heartbreaking.
They're either not able to go, or they're going like 2 days a week, or or half days or something like that. And there's the schools, and at least in my neck of the woods, are kind of all over the map. There are some places that are fully remote. There are some places that are going like 2 days a week. There's some places that are like, hey, we're going 5 days a week, or at least there are some districts thank goodness, some districts made a decision like their most severely impacted learners are going to go 5 days a week. So any specialty program, whether a kid has autism or, an ID or any type of, specialty educational, program, those learners will be able to go 5 days a week. But
so much of last year, the first half of 2020, I should say, was, I think it was hard to understand what all of this was going to look like, because it was just one of those things of, hey, have you ever done online teaching? No? Well, guess what? You got to. And it was just that sense of like, well, once the teachers figure it out, I'm sure it'll be great. And I think it's only been this fall and winter that it has really been, all right, well, we've got a lot of the logistics in place. We've got the lessons in place. The teachers are comfortable doing it, where I think, some of the concerns around just the barriers to technology that exist, the different parenting situations, and some of those will change. When we have a vaccine and COVID's not a problem, we don't have to worry as much about families probably dealing with illness. But there'll always be some illness. There'll always be some barrier for parents to be able to recreate the reinforcers and aversives that exist in a regular school environment at home. So I know when we talked about like some of the things we've learned, what are the lessons we've learned? I think some of the lessons we've learned are that as much as I think some of the research on online learning in college, like, oh, you never have to go to school again, you can do everything online. I don't think anyone is going to be pushing this as the new way to educate kids from K to at least K to high school. I do think this is going to be one of those things of, well, we at least tried that and nobody liked it. So forget it.
I also think that this has been a nice opportunity to see how some kids may learn best, right? Because I do hear other people say this has been a great opportunity for their learner because the social interaction piece is the hardest part about going to school, and that's eliminated here for better or for worse, right? Like maybe it wasn't that important as far as just learning what you need to learn. So for them, it's been a great experience, and I don't think we should discount that. And maybe this opens up new ways to think about what education should be and how it could be delivered. And for some learners, this may be a really good option.
Yes, and those kids would likely do almost as well in a school setting. And I think the lesson that I've learned from this is that school's important, and like being in school is important for those kids who need it the most. You know, and I take your point, Diana, that some kids, you know, having exposure to these different options might thrive better in those circumstances. My youngest thinks this is great, you know? Like, so he's like your oldest, right?
Yep.
You know, and it's like, you know, he can go, and I hear him in the other room, and he's jibber jabbing with his friends, and they're talking about math problems they're doing. That's all going great, you know. And so I don't, but you know, but again, I just I'm thinking about like the students that I serve professionally, and I know they're, you know, and so kids who live in environments where education's not a priority, where you know people are just trying to get by. They have lots of challenges in terms of trying to get by and whatnot. And that's the part that just it really does. It worries me considerably.
Oh yeah, no, I agree. And there's just only so many hours in the day as well. So like we made the decision not to send our youngest to kindergarten this year, which was made prior to COVID. But now I'm very glad because there's just no way I could be trying to facilitate his online learning and teaching him, you know, everything he needs to know in kindergarten. Not to discount the teachers, they're doing a great job, but a lot of it at that age still falls to the parents.
Yeah.
And try to do my full-time job and my part-time job.
Speaking of your full-time jobs, how has COVID affected the university life? Just exactly the same. Online learning, it's great. All the Zoomers or whoever's in your cohorts, they love it. They're all great, right? No problems.
So one pro, I'm going to give you one pro, is that, and that I might actually keep post-COVID, whenever that may be, is office hours online. So my office hours traditionally were in person and no one came ever. Or they came like the last 5 minutes and all of them came at the same time and there was like a super long line, right? And so I was like, ooh, office hours is just a time for me to get work done that I need to sit in my office. But now with Zoom office hours, you know, people don't have to drive somewhere. They can like just take a lunch break or, you know, they can just be at their house. And I'm actually having more student interaction during my Zoom office hours than I've ever had in any of my previous office hours. Although I do. Yeah.
Sometimes I have a Zoom line. I have to text the waiting room, be like, hang on, everyone.
Wow.
Thanks. Be a minute. Although I also appreciate when no one's on Zoom and I'm on Zoom alone and I'm like, I'm on Zoom alone.
There's something kind of fun about like joining a Zoom meeting by yourself and anyone could pop in at any moment. But I'm making a lot of progress on my one eyebrow raising, which is all thanks to Zoom. Thank you. There. I know, right? Like, look at that. That's progress.
So that's a pro that I'm going to keep. I'm going to keep post Zoom. Post, not post Zoom, but post COVID.
Right.
I find, you know, my classes, to be very blunt, have not changed a ton. We already were doing active responding. We're using the breakout rooms as small group. I mean, I can't creep on everyone's group in Zoom like I could in the classroom, right? And creep around and listen to everyone. But it hasn't changed a ton. But one thing I think I'll keep too is I've been using a lot more technology in the classes, like Kahoot and some more interactive technology responding. I actually probably keep that in the classroom whenever I go back to the classroom, because that's been nice. The only downfall I've noticed throughout, we were remote in March, and we've had classes all throughout the summer and this fall, and we're going to be continuing, albeit at least for the first 8 weeks, just because I can't give everyone in the Metro West area COVID from having everyone be in person. I don't want that on my shoulders. But
we've been remote this whole time.
Yes. Is that there is a real Zoom fatigue, right? So our classes are 4 hours long, which is a long time, right? And a long time over successive weeks. I have noticed more like death eyes. That's what I like to call, like the glassy, like, right. And it was more so when everyone was doing telehealth. So they would do telehealth all day, and then they would have class all night.
Oh no.
So that kind of killed the spirit of things. Now that it's a little more, most people are back in person, and then they only have class via, the computer is a little easier, but I have noticed that that is a real thing. Zoom fatigue is a serious thing, and I have encouraged people to turn their video off so that they're not staring at themselves all day. So that's not great.
Yeah, I think we're really at a huge advantage in that we have really small classes. So we're able to still get to know our students. I still feel like I know all my students, even though it's some of them I've only met virtually. And I spend a lot of time having them talk to one another. So we do a lot of breakout rooms, because that to me is just really critical, that you get to know your classmates. And I talk to them about how important that is, that they get to know one another, use each other as support now and as resources and colleagues in the future. So we do a lot of that. And then I pop into the breakout rooms as much as I can, but like you, Jackie, it's like you just can't get to everyone in the same way, and it's harder to know if someone's having problems. And I recently discovered, and I know I already talked to half of you about this, about Jamboards, which is like the Google deal, and you can make a place for everyone to like place ideas and work and sticky notes and stuff like that together. So I did that in one of my last classes, and even though I wasn't in the breakout rooms, I could see them all working, and I could see like the ideas that they were coming up with, and that was really cool. So that was a nice way to still feel connected, even while they have the opportunity to work together.
Let me ask you guys this.
Yeah.
So I talked to Mary Jane Weiss a few months ago about online teaching, and she was extolling some of the benefits that you guys were describing as well. One of the things she said, I'm curious to see if your experience is similar, is the ability for people to raise their hand and make, like, let's just say less than productive contributions to the class are lower, and see when people do participate, it's more intentional, it's more, kind of on topic and things, it's less disruptive and things like that. Is that something, would you say it's changed the quality of the participation at all?
I wouldn't.
Okay.
I think there's still maybe the comfort level in my classroom is different, because there is still, widely off-topic conversation sometimes, as if it was a real class. So I think our contributions are pretty much the same, for me anyway. And I do still have the select students that will, just say whatever they want to say for as long as they want to say it.
They're not deterred.
Nope. And that's okay, right? Because that also brings something to the class too. But I think I have the same level of contribution. But I'm glad that she's seeing better results there, because
Mary Jane.
Yeah, I don't know if I see that, but my students have learned that I will still 100% wait them out to get someone to respond to a question, and I will just sit there and sit there and sit there and sit there.
But they can escape so much easier now. Click.
But they can't. No. And I will just wait. I'm like, I'm going to wait. And then eventually someone will answer. So that latency has gotten a lot shorter over the course of the semester.
They want to terminate that awkward silence as quickly as humanly possible.
Oh, it is such an aversive. I don't know if folks get operants in their mailbox, but our friend D2, or Dr. Raja Raman, to those who don't know him, he had a really nice kind of like a kind of think piece article in the most recent operants. I think it just came out like a week before, not even a week, I think, before recording this, that really talked about his experience. I think it was his first or second year teaching. And all of a sudden it's like, welcome to teaching. Do it all online now.
Yeah.
And it was just such a fabulous kind of like write-up. And I think it
he's at UMBC.
Yeah. It repeated a lot, but it repeated a lot of the kind of the thoughts that you all had of like, okay, well, how am I going to make the best of this? And I know he found that like he saw some behavior in the students that was great, like in terms of the chat function. How I think we all think of chat, like if you thought of your students in class, like turning to each other and whispering and talking, we all think of that as what a rude thing to do, what a terrible thing to do. But we don't really think of that with the chat function. And it does seem for the most part that people use the chat function, at least in his estimation, people seem to use that chat function pretty effectively. I don't know if you're finding that your students are messing around in chat and doing things that you'd rather they not be doing. But I suppose it could be one of those things that college students learn to just use to have meaningful, exciting, professional level discussions, in the downtime class. Discourse. There you go, Matt. That's the word.
I know that I have not used it always in the most professional sense during like faculty meetings. I think with Rob and Diana, I'm like, what is happening here? Then I'm like, oops, that's not private.
Dude, I've been on Amazon for the past 20 minutes. Catch me up.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, it's true that you just don't know what students are doing.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Like in class, you can walk around and you can see their laptops and know if they're not being fully attentive to class, but you just have to let that go in this environment and know, like, I have no clue what you're doing. So in a way, it's a little bit freeing. You're like,
yes,
you read the material, you did your homework, and you're ready to contribute when I ask a question, then we're good.
Mm-hmm.
Like I can't control anything else. And that's kind of okay. They're grad students too, right? So like they should be ready to take away from this what they want to. And that's like, I don't mind it.
That is nice.
I've also liked, and sorry, Jackie, like this whole year, it's just been like such a crap fest. It's just like, just be lenient, right? Like if you need to turn it in late, it's okay, right? Like, and like, that's my personality anyway. So like for me, it's just been like a little bit freeing too. It's just like, it's okay. I know like this year is so hard. It's so stressful.
Not me. I like hard and fast draconian rules.
Rule with an iron fist.
That's how I roll, man. So no, that's the rule. There's no exceptions. I don't care. Pandemic.
But it's just like,
don't care.
Like everyone is like, you're so exposed, right? Like every single class, one of my children comes in. One of them practiced drums during my class the other day. And I was like, what are you doing? I'm sitting right here. Like someone's always coming in. Everett has come and said he needs to poop before. Like all of these things have happened. And like,
they see Zoom. They
no
see
way to
Zoom
hide.
As like an SD for like... Yeah. Go bother my parents. Like this is
Here
a great time to do that.
Can I play video games? Can I have a snack?
But...
Like, don't you see what I'm doing?
Same.
But, so like, there's just no hiding like who I am or what my current experience is.
Just wait 5 years and the opposite will happen.
Yeah.
It's been 3 hours and I haven't seen my kids.
Where are they?
We have crap for Wi-Fi because they're all hammering, YouTube and
Yeah. But like, there's just like a grounding of like, we're all in this together. And I see the humanity in my students and I think that they see it in me. And like, that has, I think, been a plus of this whole thing. They've been very accommodating and understanding of my situation. And I've tried to be that for them too.
Yeah. At one point my husband was potentially exposed. So he had to go to the basement and he was in the basement during one of my teaching classes. And so I teach from 5 to 9, which coincidentally, if anyone has children, that is bedtime and bath time. So I'm teaching my class while I'm providing a bath for my child and putting her to bed. And a few times I was like, hold on. And I had to like quickly mute my screen or turn my video off because my child was running naked around my like house. So, but we did it. We got through it. It was the worst thing I had ever done. But we still learned, right? Like people learn things. They got a good grade on their end of the day quiz. If they didn't, I was just going to give them anyway. And so that, your life, there's no more work-life balance, right? Like it's all meshing together.
But I think that brings us to kind of our next big trend or big topic of 2020. And I think that would be the rise of, real meaningful discussions about social justice society-wide. And I think a lot of it has to do, as much as I know when some of the, initial protests first were going on, I was thinking, how does anyone have time for anything else other than this pandemic and all the chaos that's going on? And I guess to some extent, it's just so much of what we do in our lives was exposed this year. And it was sort of like, well, I guess it's if we're not going to pay attention to how other people are dealing with things, and we're not going to just half the time see how other people are dealing with things this year and actually start making these kind of bigger changes, or at least discussing big changes related to social justice, when else is it going to happen? And so I hope we look back on this as one of the positives that come out of this time period, is that we really started a meaningful discourse. So let's talk a little bit about the kind of the bigger issue of social justice and I don't want to say the rise of social justice, but the discourse around social justice this year being a really big topic, and one I think most people have been very positive about having, even though it isn't always easy to do.
Yeah, again, I'm going to give my shout out to behavior analysis and practice, right? So they saw an area where people needed articles, people needed something to talk about, and they delivered. And that was nice, and those issues were free. And the turnaround time for most of the articles were very quick. So that was really nice to see. Yeah, I liked that.
And that was,
totally.
That was Denisha. Denisha was the guest of Denisha Jingles, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I like that you said, Rob, that this was not the beginnings of this problem, right? But it was an opportunity for more people to discover the awareness of the ongoing problem that is racial inequality in America. And I think it does, enter into our behavior analytic community in many different ways. And it's been an opportunity for people to explore that and additional groups to come forward and have the opportunity to develop communities around this issue and continue to do research, presentations, and publications on the topics. And we're not the experts on it.
Yeah, I think the four of us are definitely not the experts on this. So,
the Black Applied Behavior Analysts Group, the ABA Task Force, and then the Beautiful Humans podcast has touched a lot on social justice issues, and all of those are excellent resources to go and find out more.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and you guys have done a few episodes on this as well, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've had we had Denisha, we had Aaron from Beautiful Humans on talking about social justice. We've done a number of episodes with a variety of guests on to talk about like cultural competence. Most of them before the pandemic. So I think the eye was more on sort of just like general practitioner things to know and general ways to become better at this skill.
Right. You had Solange Forte on for that, right? If I recall correctly.
And then Liz Fong later.
Well, yeah.
Later on, and then we had Adrian Bradley and Kat Jackson of BABA talk about racial justice and inequality. Man,
talk about. I mean, you probably have to do this, because you have so many guests on too, Matt. Probably the public posting effect of like I have to get good to talk about social justice. I'm going to do it in a way that everyone can hear for the rest of time. So I better be ready to talk. I know it's very scary because I mean, you're a white male. I'm a white male. It's definitely a topic that I don't know your level of discourse around social justice, but I didn't do it a lot before the past 2 years before doing the show, because it was easy for me to sort of be like, yeah, general platitude. I'm not going to talk anymore about this, and just sort of coast on that. And it was very scary, but I was really excited to get a chance to talk about a subject that was uncomfortable, that I have benefited from not acknowledging social justice and really reflecting on that. And it certainly wouldn't have happened without having I hope it would have happened without having the podcast, but it happened a lot faster with having a podcast where that's all we're going to talk about for an hour and a half. So get ready.
Yeah. I mean, it's not an area that I certainly have covered previously, for sure. The episode that the behavioral observations did on that, I ended up actually turning it over to my colleague, Dr. Antonio Harrison. I had interviewed him previously and he's had been a podcaster, and it's just and so he knows the how to conduct an interview, and all, he just knows that how to do that. And so I actually called him up and I said, "Hey man," I said, "Look, I want you
yes.
to do this, and because I really, these are, I want you to talk about the experience of being a black man in America, essentially, because that's an experience that I don't have any knowledge of, and never will, and so he and we put we put together a team of gentlemen who ended up coming on the podcast, and so that's how I chose to cover it, is basically to let those guys kind of just in a very raw, real way, with not a lot of script to it or anything like that, just share how they were feeling at the time, and that was the way I felt I could contribute by essentially not contributing directly. I one of the things about that show is I didn't even listen to it until I downloaded it on my phone. So Antonio sent me the MP3 file. There was no intro music. There was no opening comments. There were no, I just basically processed the audio, and then uploaded it, and then left it for there. And so for me, it was exciting to listen to that as a listener.
Mm-hmm.
And that's really the perspective I want to approach that with.
It was a powerful episode. I listened. It was really powerful.
Thank you. Yeah. I was really, really pleased with how it turned out, and those guys just did a phenomenal job. So yeah. I feel kind of silly talking about, again, it's just one of those things, like you were saying, Rob, it's like, here we are, the two white guys, and it's like, so I felt the best thing I could do is just kind of get out of the way, and,
and offer up your platform. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I know that was one of the questions I asked, when we had Adrian and Kat on from Baba, was like, I'm just some white guy talking about race. Shouldn't I shut up about this? And
we said, yeah, shut up.
No, they were very nice. Maybe they were trying to be nice to me. But it was really that sense of, well, on the one hand, the same way you're talking about, like, we need to hear other people's perspective. That's so important. That has been kind of, oh, hey, you're a different culture. You're a different race. Come on and do a 5-minute talk real quick to start us off on this discussion. Then we'll let the white people get involved, and you can go away. We don't want to talk to you anymore after that. It's kind of the tenor of so many of these kind of, previous years of discussion. But then on the flip side too, it's like, well, it's not like we did it, everyone. We started talking about social justice. We fixed it. We did it this year, 2020. We solved all the problems. So it is still important. I mean, important's not the right word, but there are still a lot of white guys who are going to talk and still get an audience. So I wanted to, I was glad to hear, like, well, make sure that if you're going to talk as white guy, you at least are able to talk intelligently about a problem and know who else to bring in. Which was, it's like that I want to say double-edged sword, but that's not the expression. Yeah. Is that the expression?
They have to approach it with a level of sensitivity that takes some thought and consideration. Yeah, at least that's been my experience.
Yeah.
Recognizing that you're coming from a position of privilege, that you haven't had to think about this before now.
My family has loved talking to me about this subject, by the way, every occasion when we talk about social justice. They just love hearing me spout it. But they're also
your extended family?
My actual family. When I forced them to talk to me about social justice.
Your children?
No, my non-children family.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
The kids also don't want to talk about social justice too much, but they're kind of young, so it's not fair.
It's funny. My daughter's a sophomore in high school, and so she's becoming aware of a lot of these issues and things like that. So it's been fun having some conversations with her about a lot of this stuff. And as it relates to the issues of the role of police in these matters, I think there's a huge opening for behavior analysis really get in and you know, do some good training. I know you guys have had John O'Neill on.
As have you.
Him on as well. Yeah.
It's almost like it's a small world where there's only so many behavior analysts to go.
Well, you know, I mean, he and Don are unicorns in that, you know, there's not that many behavior analysts, you know, working in the, you know, to help law enforcement professionals do their jobs better. And they've been really good at kind of cracking that kind of niche area. So, you know, that there's not a lot of people to talk to who are doing that work. But you know, there's so many directions you can go in terms of how to improve policing and things like that. And but it's got to be approached very delicately as well, because you don't want to go into the police station and say, "Hey guys, I'm Mr. BCBA, and I'm going to learn you a lesson." You know, you know,
you're also racist. We got to fix that. Come on, everybody.
You know, and you know, and so I've had some interesting conversations with some folks, and again, I feel like I'm like, you know, kind of citing, like it's like when someone, you know, publishes a paper and they cite all their own articles. Yeah, I feel like I'm doing that right now.
It's okay.
But anyway, you know, so I think the police training piece is huge, and it's a role for behavior analysis to really advance the ball in that area. You know, how do you you know, again, going back to the stuff that John and Don O'Neill have done with, you know, doing the various, you know, kind of, you know, physical interaction procedures better, you know, with less risk and things like that. You know, to the conversation I had recently with the police officer from Fairfax County in Virginia, Joe Schlentz. He was talking about like de-escalation, and you know, he works a lot with a lot of cops who are like really, you know, super duper gung ho to the extreme, and how to get them to kind of like approach a situation, you know, a little bit more calmly, and how to support people in crisis, and you know, things like that. So it's you know, it's kind of like public education. You know, it's this huge area with lots of institutional momentum behind it, and not always in you know, sometimes in a not so great direction. With all the good intentions in the world, I should say, but you know, people in both of these professions, you know, are prone to making mistakes, and we're also dealing with the, you know, the kind of law of large numbers. You know, you know, if you got 800,000 sworn law enforcement officers in the country, you know, there's going to be a lot of that's not an insignificant number of people in the tails of that distribution. You know, so, but yeah, I'm optimistic, and as it relates to the contributions behavior analysis can make to helping, you know, cops do their jobs better, more compassionately, more effectively, etc.
Yeah, it's very, it was shocking in talking to John, what the training procedure looks like, you know, for individuals whose professional role is protect and serve, and they're going to be dealing with all sorts of possible, you know, emergency situations. And it's just, well, we've got to cover a lot. So some things will get a lot of repetition. Some things will not get as much repetition. And, you know, even in talking to some like the local, you know, I do Cub Scouts with one of our sons, and we went to the police station, and you're listening to the officer, and he is clearly like loves the town and he loves helping people, but just you could hear the language that he is using to describe the role of the police officer. It's focusing so much on aversives and focusing so much on, you know, helping other people by stopping the criminals. And it's not hard to understand. Well, I can see why now we're getting into the you know, the problems that we've been facing for years and years, and why this is now coming to such a head, because it is such a, you know, it's sort of just like that's the way the training's gone for all these years. And yeah, thinking about what, you know, as the field we can offer. Yeah, I think it's, you know, it's exciting. I mean, it's good to be able to think of so many tough topics as well. Okay, well, what can we do differently, or how can we help, and how can we as a field help? So I know that is always the pro. You know, if one still has any optimism left after 2020, I guess that's one way you could use it, right?
Well said, Rob.
All right, well let's keep on rolling. We've got couple more topics. So the BACB and international issues. I know that was kind of a big issue earlier in the year. It's still an ongoing issue, but I think other things have sort of superseded it. Do we want to kind of hit on that real quick in terms of the BACB stance regarding international certification or lack thereof, right?
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I don't it was funny. That just seemed to get wiped off the map.
I know.
It's like, COVID-19. It was like, okay, here's this massive seismic shift as it relates. Although, from what I understand, like 94% of all BCBAs are in North America. But I have tremendous, empathy for those outside of North America who are, and signed up for verified course sequences and things like that. And, there's probably a lot more to say on this. And I'm as I'm trying to formulate sentences here, I'm also recognizing that there's a lot of information that's probably out there on this that I'm not up to speed on, so I'm a bit reluctant to comment more further than that, but I would just note that it was a shock. I remember the email from the board coming out
on a Friday of New Year's Eve. It was New Year's Eve.
Yeah, it was New Year's Eve.
Sitting,
yeah.
So is this 2019 news, and we shouldn't talk about it because it doesn't count as 2020?
Yeah. That's right.
It was though, and I remember sitting. I remember exactly where I was, and at that moment, someone from an agency who has international interns called me, and they were like, "What the F? This is going to ruin everything."
Yeah.
And I was like, and I remember being like, "Yeah, we have to like figure something out." And then COVID. Right. But there are still people doing things, right? There are still people petitioning with the BACB. The BACB has been very willing to chat with other, international countries. And they have a statement on their website. They're like, if you're having concerns about this, please call us. We want to work out something for you.
They just added Australia.
Yep. They just added Australia. They have a podcast on the BACB website about this. So, it's still an ongoing issue, but it did seem to slip under the bed sheets.
Yeah, it went way off my radar screen, and of course it doesn't affect me. But it was it's funny. One of my best friends from childhood is an expat, and he lives in France. And I was actually over there staying with him over the holidays. Jealous. When I got the email, I'm like, "Oh, isn't this funny? I'm in a foreign country." He's not a BCBA, but but I remember getting that New Year's, it's New Year's Eve. It might have been New Year's Day by the time I saw the email, but it was just the irony was kind of funny.
Yeah, and I'm sure the same in that we have listeners all over the world. We have people that write to us that say that they're taking courses and they live in X country and they're hoping to sit for the exam, but this now puts them in a position where they need to travel to one of these countries in order to sit for the exam, which is often at great expense. And I do recognize that the BACB felt like they had limitations as far as just their scope of what they could be providing certification for, but the fact that they issued this without a lot of discussion or maybe consideration of how it was going to affect people, it seemed like a surprising and possibly rash decision.
I feel like
so I'm going to engage in some speculation here, so I'm just going to say that up front. So I'm kind of walking myself out into a very thin.
I've led you onto the limb with me.
Yeah. All right.
I'm with you too.
All right. I'm hoping that they, I think the board is certified by boards who certify boards. It's kind of
right.
It's kind of like Austin Powers, we make factories that make little factories. So folks of a certain age will get the.
Right? How am I supposed to read good if I can't fit into the door?
That's Zoolander, Jackie. Wrong.
Same idea.
Movie.
Very, same idea. I think the analogy will hold. Is still there, perhaps in spirit. So I have to imagine they were up against a wall as it relates to the people who oversee them in terms of their what they, what was in their purview of people to actually certify. So I
think you're right.
I probably sound like a shill for the board, but I think that's probably the most charitable explanation of the timing aspect of that announcement.
Right. I'm assuming there's also some legal issues that we don't know about.
And that's rolled into, I guess, my rambling pseudo conspiracy theory.
Well, if 2020 has been anything, I think for many people it has taught us the importance of understanding and the reality of, hey, other people have lots and lots of reasons for making decisions that we are not always able to see. And let's be empathetic. I know we're probably all, as 2021 ends, we're all like, I think my empathy meter is I'm almost out of empathy. I don't know if I can do it anymore, but hopefully we'll get a recharge with the holidays here in America, at least, and be able to start 2021, maintaining some of that knowledge of, hey, other organisms have thoughts and experiences and learning histories that are not my own. Wow, I should take that into consideration as I make my decisions. Oh boy. All right, so let's move on. So kind of one of our last topics in terms of news, and this is considering we already talked about how 2020 has been such a downer, some passings of some real leaders in the field of behavior analysis this year. We had the passing of Jose Martinez Diaz, we had the passing of Jack Michael, and we had the passing of Patricia Krantz. All three, names that are familiar, I think, to anyone who's been practicing for any length of time. I know Jose passed away in September, and Jack Michael just only recently passed away in November. And Patricia Krantz had passed away at the beginning of the year, in January of 2020. So it was one that, so much other news came out. So I think some folks might not even be aware that she had passed away. And, Jose Diaz was really important. I think talking about online learning, if you're talking about online learning, he was there from day one. I was doing like a little research, and he had started thinking about online learning for behavior analysis back in 1998. Which, I mean, I know most of us think online learning started in like 2019 maybe, but nope, 1998. And had, instrumental in Florida Institute of Technology's independent school of behavior analysis, which is, I think, looking at his obituary, had like over 25,000 students that had gone through there. So there's a huge percentage of BCBAs who probably worked with him, who saw his classes, who saw a lecture he did, who heard his name mentioned on one of the online classes they were taking. So just a real important person in the field. And I don't know if any of you knew, but I looked at, found this out when I was doing kind of a little bit of research looking at the obituary. Actually was from Cuba and had to flee Cuba during the start of Castro's regime way back when. I know a lot of people kind of forgotten that was a thing at this point, because relations have been a bit better in the past few years, but so
I didn't realize that.
Yeah, and then he went to Miami and from Cuba and had been there. I know I saw a great talk he did years and years back, and I thought, who is this guy? He's great. I love it when he's great. Hawaiian shirt. It's just very exciting.
Right, the really cool accent. I remember, I met him very, very briefly, and it's like every time we think about these, kind of passings, if you will, it's one of those things. It's like, I remember talking to him very briefly about doing an interview, and it's just one of those things where it just didn't make it happen. And I think last year we were talking about Tony Nevin, and it was like the same thing. It's like, oh man, it'd be nice, but obviously with Jose, there's so much footage of him. So I think I remember taking the online ethics from FIT during one of my research cycles, and I just remember the cue for the ASR was, he's like, respond. And, it was kind of a fun memory. Actually, I met him, Jackie. Diana. It was right after I met you at APBA in New Orleans. It was in that huge room that was like super loud. It was
that was me, right? I think we met.
I don't remember.
It was because I know you guys.
I think that is where I met him.
Me too.
I only met him the one time.
Oh no, I met you in passing. Remember, out of the elevator.
That's right. That was at ABBA.
Yeah.
In Denver. Yeah. But it was. I
think you're right. I think you're right, Matt.
Yeah,
you were doing a poster.
Yeah, no,
very
you're
possible.
It was clearly memorable for all parties involved.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, but I never had the opportunity to really get to know Jose other than that one time that I met him. But clearly he's very beloved in the behavior analytic community, and he's such a larger than life personality. And, news of his passing spread far and wide, and so many people were reporting that how much he meant to them, how much he shared his love of behavior analysis with them and really got them invested in the field. And clearly he's going to be missed beyond just the FIT community. He touched a lot of people's lives. So.
Mm-hmm. So the other big passing was certainly Jack Michael, just recently in November. And if you don't know Jack Michael, you are not in a behavior analytic program, I'm guessing, and you found this download on accident, because he is one of the kind of the current era really popularized verbal behavior. He, quote unquote, I put it in quotes just because I don't know, I don't have a better precise way to describe it at this point, really invented the idea of motivating operations. I still remember reading second edition Cooper, Heron, and Heward and reading that whole chapter. And it was a very hard chapter to understand.
And then rereading it.
And rereading it. Yep. Oh, so many times. And just being like, oh, it was written by the guy who invented this. Oh, wow. Like, even as a graduate student, I was like, wow, he took time out of his schedule to write a chapter about the thing he made up based on human behavior. That's so awesome. I just thought it was so very cool. Again, same thing. He has taught so many people who now are really at the forefront of verbal behavior research and technology. So certainly Mark Sundberg, Kyle Miguel, Sarah Lachago. It just has, it's so much. I mean, again, you don't know basic, even if you're talking about basic behavior analysis, you're probably talking about that kind of the fourth leg of the 3-term contingency. You're talking about something that was described and written about elegantly by Jack Michael. And, again, fun, I guess I don't say fun fact, but like an interesting thing that I never would have thought of. He'd fought in World War II, was in his obituary, which again, not something that ever came up in any of his published research that I knew of.
You're not going to see that much more.
No,
in obituaries.
No, you're certainly not going to.
We're almost out of that era, so.
And I do actually. I didn't have any really great Jose stories, but Kaio was my specialist when we were all still working at the New England Center for Children.
Which means BCBA.
BCBA was a BCBA overseeing me when I was still in my graduate program for special education, actually. And I'd done a thesis on response interruption redirection, so like the initial work. So I had a poster at Bacb one year, and who was at Bacb that year? Why, Jack Michael was there, and Kaio knew Jack Michael, and Kaio knew the research I was doing because he oversaw much of the work I was doing. So he had Jack come over, and he was very nice and talked about our poster. And even then, I knew, even not being in a behavior analytic program, I knew this guy's somebody really important, and I made sure to get a picture of him standing by my poster.
Oh, that's cool.
Being my current sister-in-law, not my sister-in-law at the time. There are only so many Perry Cruises in the world. The majority of them are BCBAs, except for my brother.
No, not true, because of all the children.
Well, don't count not counting the children. Those who can have jobs, they're BCBAs. And yeah, maybe they will be. You're right, Matt. Maybe they'll all be BCBAs. Except my brother, who went into finance, and now he's just rich. So
I don't know. Our 12-year-old is like, "What are you reading? Are you reading Skinner? Is that part of your cult?"
Yeah, he's really weirdly about
is Skinner your cult founder?
Cult stuff. I don't know.
It's like, no. I mean, I'll explain it to you later.
Yes, that was my Jack Michael claim to fame. I got to talk to him for a few minutes as a graduate student, not even of behavior analysis. So I don't think I said anything intelligent in our conversation, but it was really exciting. Like, even then I knew, like, this is an important person. Oh boy. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely a giant for sure.
Mm-hmm. And then finally, Patricia Krantz, who, again, passed away right at the beginning of the year. So given how this year has gone, I don't know if it was something that was, I certainly wasn't on my radar until, not too long ago. But she was the director of the Princeton Child Development Institute. Again, most of you out there listening are like, that name sounds so familiar. If you've ever used the picture activity schedule written with
Krantz and McClanahan.
Yeah, with McClanahan. Yeah. That's she was the author of that. And she's
the authors
really,
of that study always makes me think of the Golden Girls.
Maybe that's why. You're right. It does always make me think of Rue McClanahan.
Right? I think that must be why.
Took time out of her busy filming schedule to invent picture activity schedules or write about the research with them. But she was so again, published research. Y'all probably have read the picture activity schedule research that Krantz and McClanahan did, but she was a real early advocate for better educational services for children with autism. So like way back in the 70s, so even pre-Lovaas studies was looking at how can we provide better services for children with disabilities, specifically with autism. She also did a lot of work with like the teaching family model, which I know in the 70s and 80s was kind of a real interesting way to look at how can we provide better educational outcomes and behavioral outcomes for children from with severe problem behavior but without a disability. She did a lot of the early replications on that, and again spoke out really highly about how important it is for our programs to have replicable measures of procedural integrity. So what is it that we are doing as a field that can then be used by other people? So again, I think that's so easy for us to think about now, the idea of like, oh yeah, of course, if people do something in behavior analysis, I want to read their article, I want to replicate it, I might want to use some of it. But writing about this back in the 70s when I wasn't alive in the 70s, so I don't know what it was like, but perhaps it was much more just like everyone do whatever and good vibes will get us through the day. So if you've ever said it's so nice that things get written down so that I can replicate them, there are a lot of people to thank for that. But it does sound like Patricia Krantz was really one of the at the forefront of, hey, we need to run our programs for kids with disabilities that way too. That's going to be an important component. And not the only person to do that, but certainly something that I think she was known for. And a lot of the people writing about her passing really brought up that idea of procedural integrity as being something that was very important to her. I think we take it for granted that like, oh yeah, it's important for everyone, right? We all think that, but apparently not always.
Thank you, Rob.
Yeah, that's good.
I always like to champion early women in our field because there weren't a lot of them and they don't always get recognition, but she should. Mm-hmm. And
good point.
Yeah.
Even I love picture activity schedules. So even in just that one tiny area, just amazing work. So sad. So wow, this has been a depressing episode of Year in Review 2020. But so let's not end on a sad note.
You take the good, you take the bad, you take them all.
You take the rest.
And then you have the facts of life.
I was going to say, wait, I know that I know.
I got one.
So Jackie got one pop culture reference in all of 2020.
She's cabbage patching everyone.
Entire life, actually. In all of our podcasts, I never get references.
Never.
And that's what we have to be thankful for.
Yep. That's what we're looking for in 2021 is that Jackie might get a second cultural reference.
Oh, you leave her alone.
Pop culture reference.
Thanks, Diana.
She's got your back. So let's talk about what we are either thankful for. So what was a positive from this year, or what are we looking forward to in the new year? Like, what are we hoping is better? Let's all hope that everyone is healthy and we don't have to worry about pandemics anymore in 2021. So that's a given. So beyond that, what is everyone looking forward to in the new year?
I'm looking forward to my child going back to school, hugs, and actually being able to do my job. Yes. All of my jobs, my side job and my full-time job.
So folks, if you go to a conference and you actually get to be there in person, you see Jackie, run up and give her a big hug.
I will hug you. It's bad. It's going to be bad. I'm going to hug long.
It's going to be uncomfortable.
Yeah, it's going to be long. It's going to be uncomfortable. It's probably going to be painful because I've been lifting weights during this pandemic. So my arm muscles are more defined now. So even my child at the present moment is like, do not hug me. It's too hard. Same thing with Diana's kid. She's like, it's too hard because I'm a super hugger and I only
don't know your own strength. You gotta.
I know, but I'm a super hugger and I have not been able to spread the wealth in 9+ months, really. And so it's going to be bad. It's going to be good. It's going to be so good.
Good, bad.
It's hug deprivation.
So I can't wait to hug every listener. I'm going to be like Romper Room on like super speed. So if anyone's like, Jackie, I'm like, you know me? Right?
Coming in. Here I come.
Coming in
and I'm staying. It's not like a quick like pat on the back. It's going to be like an in. I'm going to like feel your soul.
It's like hold. Just hold.
And maybe you can do,
wow.
circle back rub. It might be coming there. So that's what I'm excited for.
You're not going to do the pat.
This is going levels.
We're going to hire an HR department for our podcast.
Right. Holy HR department. Just for the hug. I've
got the statement already prepared. It's fine.
So that is what I'm looking forward to most. I'm looking forward to seeing how our field does better. That's what I'm really looking forward to based on all the research that's coming out now, all the discussions we're having. I'm looking forward to seeing how we can incorporate the anti-ABA movement into our field and address those concerns and issues. That's something I'm really looking forward to in 2021. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because I meant to touch on it earlier and I'm glad that you did. I think that this year has been so bad that it's allowed us to not run away from problems, right? But you're just like, I might as well just wallow in everything that makes me feel terrible, and hopefully come out on the other side as a better person, and recognizing the history of our field and the challenges that it's still experiencing as a part of that, and how we can hopefully make some of those things better moving forward. So I am looking forward to that. I'm glad you brought that up, Jackie. I think for me personally, it's recognizing just the limits of who I am as a human being and what I'm able to accomplish in the current situation, and trying to be forgiving for myself and not accomplishing everything that I want to currently, and hopefully being able to appreciate the opportunity when it comes to do those types of things that I want to do, and really appreciate having those opportunities. And I'm hoping I will get some of those in 2021.
Yeah, I would say for me, in terms of the thankful piece, I'm extraordinarily grateful to everyone who listens to the show. That might sound obvious, but it's not to me. When people choose to download a podcast and listen to it, they're committing time, and time is not a renewable resource. And so the fact that people are finding things that, either, your podcast or mine, they find it interesting, they listen to it, they get some meaning out of it. It's incredibly gratifying to be able to provide that to folks. And so that has been something that certainly sustained me through a lot of this stuff that's been, very challenging. So I'm incredibly grateful to everyone who listens to the show, and certainly all the people who have contributed to it as well, whether that's the guests or the people supporting the show, through sharing it with their friends, or, buying CEs, et cetera, et cetera. So all that and more. And I guess the things that I'm looking forward to in 2021 is to, try to continue to do that and try to figure out ways I can kind of do it better, certainly. I'm also, just from a practice standpoint, trying to think of the things that we've learned as it relates to, whether it's telehealth or other sorts of things. Post-pandemic, what practices have we adopted that we don't want to give back? There's some things that we've had to do just out of necessity, but maybe a better way of doing things. For example, 2 years ago, if there was an IEP meeting that I was invited to participate in, for me to say, can you guys conference me in, would have been like, whoa, you want us to use this space age technology?
Right.
Do you want us to land something on the moon too while we're at it? And now everyone's on Google Meets, and it's like no big deal. And so it just from I'm not saying that to be lazy, but it's like I can serve more people, or I could attend to other things that need attending to, instead of just driving aimlessly in my truck, to go to a meeting that I can attend from my basement, So and there's probably other types of things I'm forgetting right now, but what are the things that we've learned through this that we don't want to kind of give back, if you will, that can optimize what we're doing, that can help us save more time or serve more people or be more efficient with what we do. So those are the things I'm looking forward to in 2021. In addition to all the obvious things like, hopefully the pandemic winding down, and, all the everything else. That we
A
talked
hug
about
I give
already.
you. The long, painful, uncomfortable hug I give you.
Now Matt can't go to any conferences because he's got this warning now, Jackie. He's like, I gotta I'll go into everything.
I'll wear a disguise.
I'll see through it.
Of course.
Well, I think that brings us to the end of our is this our third? This is our third year end
It's the
wrap
third
up.
one, yeah.
So I'm going to steal a line I think you had last year, Matt, when we did this is, if we do a third one, it's a trend. So I guess everyone knows what to look forward to next year.
All right.
Another one. Again and again.
All right. Yeah, I can't think of a better way to cue the outro music.
And well, just one more thing I want to say that we should all be thankful for is we've started this at the same time, and that means that we're both coming up on our 5-year anniversary.
Oh, that's right.
Oh, how do we
very
still do
soon,
this?
I think in March of 2021. So we should just say congrats to one another.
Yay!
That's right. Yeah. I think mine is.
Can't believe it.
Yeah.
Yours
I'm
is
going to pour you a little more so that we can do it. We can do a cheer.
The listeners might not agree with that idea, but okay.
I finished, Matt.
Yeah,
You're going to have
I'm
to
out
pretend,
too.
people.
Yeah, I'll just hold the can up. Yeah.
Hold the can. I'm going
right.
to take our picture.
Oh, okay.
Get it in there. Get it in there.
Okay,
Yeah, I
get it
do.
in
I
there?
do print screen.
Shift print screen.
No, I think just print screen.
No, shift print screen.
Well, I can't do that and hold it. No.
We got two hands. We'll
Okay,
do
here
it.
we go.
Ready?
Smile.
We get it?
I think so.
Thanks.
I did a bunch of them, but I
Just
think only
learn-
the last one counts.
Just learn
that
how
was
to
silly.
do that.
Yep. Yeah.
Okay.
All right. So for everyone listening at home, thank you also very much for a fabulous 2020, at least in terms of listening to ABA Inside Track, listening to behavioral observations.
We made it, guys.
We hope that if this was the first episode you've heard of either show, well, hey, why not subscribe to go to find us on Apple Podcasts. Honestly, if you subscribe to one of our shows, Apple will tell you to subscribe to the other one because we both, like Diana said, we've been around that long.
Right.
So
Yeah, pretty much.
Right, yeah.
ABA Inside Track. You subscribe to one, they'll say, hey, you might like this one because
Yeah.
you will.
Chances are. What are the odds,
boy.
right?
What are the odds? Well, here's to 2021. Thank you all so very much for listening, and we'll all be back with more podcasts in the new year. But until next time, so long, everyone. Bye. Happy New Year.
Bye.